So welcome back to this lecture titled Spain and the Netherlands, European Domination, Hegemony to Ruin. So we're going to start with an essential question. How was Philip II able to dominate the international politics in an age of religious tension? And to what extent did religious versus geopolitics play a decisive role in the breakup and demise of Spanish power by 1600? So you can see sort of another version of that question on the right. On the left, you see a map of the Spanish dominions, both in Europe, the Iberian Peninsula, parts of southern Italy, parts of the Holy Roman Empire, the Netherlands in the north, and then you can see out in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and then in the Western Hemisphere, most of South America, all of Central America, Mexico, and then parts of North America. So truly a vast empire. So we're going to start with the economic situation of Spain that made it the dominant power. We had the wealthy and populous Castile state, in addition to the regular arrival of gold and silver from the Spanish colonies, which you can see pictured there. And in fact, there were new silver mines at Potosi, in present-day Bolivia, that opened up in the 1540s and provided Spain with a steady flow of wealth that the king needed to pay for the consolidation of his power in the Spanish kingdom. In short, money is a key ingredient for the success of a king in this time period, and Spain had plenty of it. Spain was also a nation dedicated to the absolutist model of kingship. And when we talk about absolutist models, what I mean is that there was no alternative authority that could challenge the king or the queen. And this is something that we see Spain do quite well compared to other areas of Europe. In fact, Spain emerges from the medieval period stronger than most of its other neighbors in Europe, and also a lot less tolerant than it had been. And we have to remember that the union of the two kings, Castile and Aragon, by dynastic marriage, Isabel and Ferdinand, gave Spain not only a consolidated political structure and set of institutions, but also a very strongly felt spiritual mission. And that is, a nation to be truly unified had to have one faith. So we're going to look at Spain as being a nation that is politically unified, but also has a special mission, and that was to reimpose Christian Catholic unity. So when we talk about religious unity in Spain, we're talking about Catholic unity. And this was a source of great pride for the Spanish, and it really kind of energized much of what the Spanish did. Now, the new American wealth, as well as new crops that came in from the New World, provided a more secure source of food. And this caused a dramatic increase in the population in Europe. And by 1600, Europe had reached a population of about 70 million, and Spain was the largest nation in the 16th century. So, as a result of the money and wealth that was flowing in and an increased population, there was a concomitant rise in prices. And that's what that graph shows you there, the consumer prices in European cities, as measured in grams of silver. So the prices are being measured in grams of silver. And I think you can see that that top line, by about 1550 to 1600, all across the major markets, the towns in Europe, you can see fairly dramatic rises in prices. And that was going to cause some problems for the Spanish. So while the Spanish have this steady flow of bullion into the kingdom that they can use to pay for the military and purchasing luxury goods, we're also going to see that there is a increase in prices that's going to hurt. And as the population increased, the wages of workers remained the same or fell flat, while prices for basic necessities were in fact doubling in some cases. So this inflation is really going to set Spain into a negative economic kind of situation. That is, Spain's not going to grow economically, and it seems somewhat of a paradox. While it has all this money flowing in, Spain never really did what it needed to do to develop its own internal industries and businesses. So Spain enjoyed a period of good living, and it was sort of the golden age of Spain in the latter part of the 16th century, but that wasn't going to last all that long. the next thing we're going to talk about is the idea, and I've already mentioned this, that the Catholic faith was an important and central part of Philip II's designs for Spain and his worldwide empire. So that's going to be an important thing as we begin to look at the Netherlands. The next thing we're going to look at and talk about in terms of Spain and its dominance in the latter part of the 16th century is its wars against the Turks. So if it's true that the Holy Roman Empire fought wars against the Turks on its borders in Austria, and remember that the Spanish and the Austrian houses are allied, that is, they're both Habsburg family dynasties, the Spanish are going to fight battles against the Muslims in the Mediterranean Sea, and the most famous of these battles occurred at this town called Lepanto, and you can see that just above the Greek sort of peninsula there in red. And this battle occurred in 1571, and the forces, the Spanish naval forces led by Don John of Austria, again a Habsburg, and I think you can see him pictured up there on the ship in this great big helmet with a great big plume, leading his ship against the Turks, and they defeat the Turks at this important battle, and they stop the advance of the Muslims, at least from influencing the Kingdom of Naples, as you can see there. And again, that was a Spanish possession. So the Spanish very much were also on the front lines of the dealing with the threat of the Ottoman Empire, and that is going to be an important victory for them. Some 30,000 Turks are killed in action, and 1/3 of the Turkish fleet is also destroyed, though the Turks did maintain their control over the Mediterranean island of Cyprus and would continue to be a threat to European powers. Nonetheless, Spain emerges in a position of strength, emboldened by this great, mighty defeat of the Ottoman Turks. And the last thing we'll talk about, and I think I already mentioned this, was the fact that in 1580, Philip II and his forces suppressed a rebellion in the neighboring nation of Portugal. And lo and behold, he then takes over the throne of Portugal and incorporates that into his holdings in the Iberian Peninsula. And so Spain really does become sort of a superpower, a dominant power on the international and geopolitical scene. Its size and dimensions are unrivaled. Yet the size was also a problem. It made these lands very difficult to rule. Number one, they were very far apart. Number two, what really united these lands? Well, not language. The only thing that really united all these lands was the Catholic faith. But underneath that, or beneath that, it was really not an empire that was easily united, because you have different customs, different languages, great distances, etc. And that's going to sort of be the Achilles heel of the great Spanish Empire. Though nonetheless, the Spanish had great plans and ambitions to impose order and authority on the rest of Europe. And there's this old idea that we've talked about, that great rulers have great dreams of reimposing European domination, going all the way back to the idea of the Roman Empire, to the Empire of Charlemagne. Charles V had tried, and in 1552 had given up the quest to reimpose unity. Well, Philip II is the son of Charles V, and so I think it's natural and understandable that he too is going to give it a go. And he too will fail. And so that's something that we're going to try to understand. Why, when Philip II seemingly had everything going for him, good naval forces, good land forces, overseas empires that brought in crops, that brought in a steady supply of gold and silver, why did things fall apart, and why then did he fail? So that's where we're going. So we've set up Spain, hopefully. If you have any questions, please let me know. And we're now going to take a look at, again, an image here that I think is rather interesting. Philip II at the height of his power. And this is the old idea of the man on a horse. And the man on a horse gets quite a lot of respect in medieval and early modern Europe. And you can see him there dressed in fancy military garb, and then being accompanied by an angel. So there's this idea of the unity of earthly power and divine power in the person of Philip II, the man on the horse. And you can see the extension of his lands in Europe, including the Netherlands. And that's where we're going to turn our attention to in this next part of the lecture. So, the Netherlands, the beginning of the end. So the question here is, how did a rebellion motivated by religion, that is competing truth claims again, bring down the most powerful ruler in Europe? And I have pictured here the map of the Netherlands. Now, if you look at that map, I hope you are somewhat confused. The Netherlands is a collection of some 17 different provinces. And you can see them all there with different colors, different shadings. And these provinces had long-standing histories of independence. Each one also had what was called a States General, and that was a representative body of the nobility and the townspeople, that is merchants and business people, that met to discuss the business and the politics of that particular state. So remember that idea, the States General. And I think this map gives you a very good idea of what's going on in the Netherlands. That is, it is not a unified, consolidated state, though we call it the Netherlands. You can see it's this collection, like a puzzle almost. And again, it reminds one of the Holy Roman Empire. So the Netherlands is completely unlike Spain, something we want to remember. In the center there, you see a group of Calvinist businessmen doing their work. And we know they're Calvinists because they have their dress, their dark clothes, black clothes. We might think of them as Puritans. In fact, Calvinists were the Puritans that came to Massachusetts. And they look rather serious as they go about their business. Simple room, no paintings on the walls, no other objects or adornments, simply what is probably a ledger book, and they're there to discuss their business. Now, the picture on the left, far left there, is a picture of Amsterdam, itself a growing and beautiful city, center of commerce, and you can see large impressive buildings and a big open square that would allow people to conduct business, allow people to meet and discuss politics, etc. So, and we must remember, and I don't know if I made this clear or not, but the Netherlands were part of the Spanish Habsburg possessions through, again, these dynastic marriages. So the Spanish control very much the Netherlands, and they have an interest in controlling the Netherlands because of its trade. And the Netherlands, being on the sea, as you can see there, had easy access to ports across Europe and then increasingly across the world. So we're going to get started, and I think we've already talked about that. Now, what we have here is two people, Margaret and a Cardinal, Granville. And Margaret is the half-sister of Philip II. Now, Philip II was actually born and lived in the Netherlands, and in 1559, Philip leaves the Netherlands and goes back to Spain to take up the throne after his father had given up the throne, and he leaves Margaret, his half-sister, in charge of the Netherlands with a great council of noble people, including this cardinal here, Granvelle. And they had a plan that was very much sort of the Spanish playbook, the Habsburg Spanish playbook, if you will. And that was to consolidate authority, both political authority and religious authority in the Netherlands, and impose order on what, if I go back, you can see is that patchwork-like state of affairs in the Netherlands. And so that is what they're going to try to do. And I think you can already maybe begin to imagine what problems they're going to encounter as they try to achieve their goals. So at this point, let's go on. And here are, in fact, some of the great Dutch men, and they go by the title of grandees. So they were great nobles. And you can see William of Orange in a statue on the left, and you can see the Counts of Egmont and Horn on the right. Now, these gentlemen, being great nobles, are going to organize resistance to Margaret and Granville. So the stage is set then for conflict. And so remember that the question I asked at the beginning of the lecture is, well, how is it that this small state, the Netherlands, is going to, in effect, bring down a much larger and more powerful state, Spain, in its worldwide dominions? And so here we have the stage is set for a rebellion. So, and I think it's worth remembering that merchant towns, much like in France and in the Italian peninsula, if we remember back to Florence, were very wealthy, and they were accustomed to a high degree of independence, and also tolerance was fairly typical. That is, they were more interested in making money, not in enforcing religious purity or any kind of cultural purity, at least at the outset. Now, that is going to change. And the provinces of the Netherlands really resented Grenville's plan. And we see these three leaders that are going to come together and form what is known as the Solemn League in 1563. And they organized stiff resistance to the Spanish policy of unification and consolidation of power. William of Orange was a Catholic himself. He then became a Lutheran when he married Anne of Saxony, the daughter of a Lutheran elector, Maurice of Saxony. And remember, Saxony is the place where Luther began his challenge, and the Duke of Saxony provided Luther protection. So William of Orange goes from Catholic to Lutheran. He'll later then become a convert to Calvinism after the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572. So what we're going to quickly see is there's going to be a religious element that fuses itself onto what is a political plan by Margaret and Granville. And so we're going to, again, combine politics and religion. And after having looked at France and studied France at some length, this should not be a surprise. So I think there's a pattern here, and it's going to repeat again and again and again in this time period in early modern history. So let's go forward after that. We're going to get into a couple of different phases of this rebellion. One of them was also called the Affair of the Beggars, and you can see a beggar there. In 1561, Cardinal Granvelle proceeded with his plan to reorganize the Netherlands and bring the Protestant communities under the control and supervision of the Catholic Church. And he did this by enforcing heresy laws. So remember I said that these great nobles in the Netherlands are going to begin to convert to Calvinism, Lutheranism and Calvinism, as a way to assert their independence from the Habsburg Catholic monarchy and rule. And so one of the things that Grenville, being a Catholic cardinal himself, is he's going to, on orders from Philip II, the King of Spain, he's going to enforce heresy laws. And these heresy laws were aimed at eradicating Protestants in the Netherlands. And at this point, though, William and Egmont, the two counts, two dukes, or not dukes, they were, I guess they were dukes, are able to actually get King Philip to remove Grenville from power. They petitioned King Philip and they said, look, this guy Grenville, he's doing things we find objectionable and offensive. We want him to be removed. And King Philip did remove Cardinal Grenville. However, King Philip did not agree to relax his persecution of Protestants. And remember that King Philip is firmly committed to the idea of one faith and Catholic unity as the foundation of a solid and stable state. So King Philip, in the face of continued Protestant expansion into the Netherlands, issued what came to be known as the Segovia Woods Letter. And the Segovia Woods Letter in 1565 was a hard-line statement against all Protestants in the Netherlands. And he instructed William and Egmont, these two Protestant dukes and noblemen, he instructed them that they had the task of strictly enforcing the heresy laws, or that they would be brought up on charges of disobedience to the king's direct orders. And that would be tantamount to treason. So King Philip, yes, removes the cardinal, but then he kind of sticks it to these two great Dutch dukes and saying, well, you guys take care of the Protestant problem. So what we have then in 1565 is the nobles in the Netherlands had a choice to make. Do they obey the king? Or do they actively resist him? And what we're going to see, that what gets mixed up in all of this is going to be a series of taxes where Spain, King Philip, are trying to extract more money from the people as the flow of silver and gold from the New World begins to slow down, or English pirates begin to raid those shipments. And this is going to set up a great, again, conflict. And the grandees, or the important nobles, they really side with the king at first, and they agree to enforce the heresy laws. However, the lesser nobility And here, social class distinctions are quite important. And I think we can see that social class distinctions are important when we have national political elections in our own country. The lesser nobility didn't agree with the greater nobility, and so the lesser nobility forms a group called the Confederates in 1566, and these Confederates draw up something that they call a request, a formal request that demanded that King Philip abandon the heresy laws, or that they be loosely applied, whatever that means. So the grandees, who were in a position of power, initially refused to do this. They said, no, we have to follow the king's orders. So on April 5th, 1566, some 300 armed Confederates, that is the lesser nobility, forced their way into the chambers of Margaret of Parma. And remember, she's kind of the regent or governor of the Netherlands, the half-sister of Philip II. And the lesser nobility figured, well, if the greater nobility won't go along with us, we'll go right to Margaret of Parma, the regent here in the Netherlands. And they present the request to her. And under duress, 300 armed men, she agreed to suspend the heresy persecutions. But she too insisted that the Protestants not worship in public places, but they worship only in private. This is something that we saw in France, and we need to remember that. So this idea of private versus public worship. So it's a form of acceptance and toleration of the Protestant groups, yet there are going to be limitations and restrictions. However, and on April 9th, the grandees, that is the great dukes of William, the Duke of Horns, and the Duke of Egmont, jump on board this idea with the lesser nobility. So they join forces, and they're able to extract even more concessions from Margaret that are favorable to the Protestants. And in a sense, they allow Protestant pastors to begin preaching to large crowds in public. So this is a great step forward in terms of religion and the Protestant ability to practice one's religion in the Netherlands. Now, what do you think then is going to be the response of the Spanish? Well, they're not going to like this at all. And they're going to try to get the greater nobility to stop the lesser nobility from causing trouble. And what really happened was that both the greater nobility and the lesser nobility and Margaret of Parma simply put lost control over the situation. Things got heated. The pastors, who now felt liberated to preach in public, do so. And they deliver fiery sermons across the towns of the Netherlands, in which they encourage people to follow their faith, that is the Protestant faith, and they incite attacks on Catholic churches and the destruction in those Catholic churches of statues of Jesus, statues of the Virgin Mary, stained glass, all those things that we saw occur in France. So again, we see this repetition of actions, both from France now into the Netherlands. Now, these preachers were called hedge preachers, and they were really effective in stirring up trouble. And that's going to happen across, as I said already, across the Netherlands in August of 1566 with what was known as the sacking of Catholic churches. And again, this is going to happen in England as well later on when we see the English crown confiscating monasteries and churches. So, and this event, this sacking of churches, actually has its own name. It was called the Iconoclastic Fury. And it reveals what people that hold religious beliefs, deeply hold religious beliefs, what they can do. So otherwise rational people become quickly irrational when stirred up by the words of these fiery preachers. Again, something we will see throughout the course of this year, the power of fiery language to get people to do things they otherwise would not do. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. And it sort of underscores, and you might ask, well, why were people willing to do this? And it underscores something that we haven't talked about all that much, but we need to now. There was a lot of economic stagnation. Again, those prices that I showed you, that price inflation chart, right? Wages not going up, but going down. The price of goods going up. So there was a lot of economic insecurity and anxiety that may sound a lot like today in modern American society. Economic anxiety drives people to do things that they might not otherwise do. And the other thing we see is then the potent seed of nationalism begin to appear and germinate in the Netherlands. That is, the people of the Netherlands begin to resent the Spanish interference in their daily lives and in the practice of their religion. And so we see now that the people of the Netherlands, led by the greater nobility, the lesser nobility, are going to begin to feel as though they're Dutch and that they're not Spanish, and they're going to begin to act in ways to bring about the realization of a Dutch state. And I think that's really the big idea here. So the wars of religion are going to give rise to nationalism. All right. Now with that, I'm going to stop this lecture, and we'll divide this up into two. If there are any questions, please let me know, and I will be happy to take that up in class. Thank you.